Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Plutzi. I'm the creator of Grim the Card Game, and in this video we're going to be talking about the different mechanics of each of the elemental Grim decks. Hopefully by the end of this video you have a generalized sense of what each of them does, so that when you enter the pick ban phase with your opponent, you kind of have an idea about what you might want to take, or what you might end up taking sort of as your main as you play for games to come. So I'm going to walk through each of these in tow, but one thing I do want to clarify up front is that Grim is an extremely broad game, and so each of these elemental Grim decks has a very unique feeling. Generally speaking, they manipulate one or two different knobs that the general game flow provides for it. But what you want to be thinking of as a player is not what each individual deck does, but rather how two of these decks will pair together. So there's sort of a layered thought process here. Fire may be very, very interesting to you, but the question is not, do you like fire? The question is, do you like fire when paired with X? I think it's great to find a deck that you can really rely on, and then start branching out to try all of the others. But really start thinking up front, what am I going to put that with, and what's going to make fire do what I want it to do? So that's kind of where your mind is going to want to be while we walk through all of these. So let's start with water. Very, very interesting type here. I tend to say that these early types, water, fire, plant, earth, are sort of the bread and butter of the basics of Grim, in that they deal with a lot of stamina, a lot of damage, a lot of health, and then a lot of, what's a good way to put it, targeting generally. So starting with water here, I'm going to divide this into three separate cards that I think really represent what the deck does. So starting over here with the Rain Dance. This card is quite interesting. It represents the way that the water deck redirects attacks. The water deck is very good at taking a declared attack against it and forcing it in some other direction. So if you look at the Rain Dance's passive, which is the box at the bottom of the card here, it says that enemy Grim cannot declare an attack on this Grim's ally if that ally has less current health than this Grim. So as an example, putting it up here, if the Rain Dance was here, and the Spatial Flow was here, and the Rain Dance was at full health, and the Spatial Flow was at full health, then in this case, the Spatial Flow would have less health than the Rain Dance, which means my opponent could not target the Spatial Flow with an attack. They'd be forced to target the Rain Dance. Why is this important? Well, as you draw cards throughout the game, you'll come across spirits, and spirits are stacked underneath your Grim. Once you get 3 spirits attached to a Grim, you unlock a spirit bonus, and they're all shown on this handy player guide card over here, which, by the way, on the other side has statuses that we will talk about soon. Spirit bonuses are extremely powerful, and so redirecting your opponent's attacks or forcing them to focus one Grim over the other is extremely important for mounting a strategy that can get you a spirit bonus. So in this case, attack redirection could be your best friend if that's what you're going for. Let's talk about Spatial Flow. Spatial Flow represents sort of the other side of water, which is stamina gain. So the two things that water does very well is redirect attacks and gain stamina. Taking a look specifically at Fathom Dive, which is the attack on the right, this attack does 8 damage. And then if you have water synergy, which of course is its in-deck synergy, meaning its ally has to be a water Grim or have a water element attached, you get to steal up to 2 stamina from any one Grim. That doesn't only include the Grim that you attacked. You may knock out one Grim and then steal 2 stamina from the other Grim, which is extremely powerful. If you know the way that this game flows, Grims start with 5 stamina, and they gain 2 stamina on their turns. If they're launching an 8 damage attack like Spatial Flow is, they need to gain the 2 stamina at the start of their turn, but then they'll spend 4 stamina to launch that 8 damage attack. It's always half of the base list. If my opponent had done this, and then I stole 2 stamina from them, then next turn when they gain 2 stamina, they would not have enough to use that 8 damage attack again. So this is an extremely useful mechanic. Gaining stamina and stealing stamina, and then in other ways, using excess stamina to your benefit. So let's talk about the third card that I have here, Abyssal Zone. So this third card in all of these stacks is sort of me trying to show how the basic idea, so here redirection and stamina gain, can really be used in excessively creative ways within the game. So looking at Abyssal Zone's passive, we see this Grimm's ally may use stamina as extra health by discarding an attached spirit after set health to 1. So let's just say, for example, this Grimm is here, and I am at 1 health, and let's say I got a bunch of stamina. And was this the spirit? Yes, it was. Let's put a spirit under here. What Abyssal Zone's passive allows you to do is it allows you to, when the spatial flow is attacked, take your health away, and then also just pay an attached spirit to use your stamina as additional health. And if you happen to live, meaning you don't also run out of stamina, you set your health to 1. This is effectively like an attack redirection because it redirects from your health to your stamina, but then it also benefits from you gaining all of that stamina. If Spatial Flow was using Fathom Dive throughout its time on the board and stealing stamina from the opponent, and mind you, if it was in the water afterworld, the water world, it would gain 2 more stamina, which is fantastic for it. It could be up to 10 stamina. And with Abyssal Zone, that's an extra 10 health as long as it has a spirit attached. So you can see immediately how gaining stamina doesn't just open you up to not being incapable of launching attacks that might be more expensive. It can be used in other very creative ways as well. So let's go ahead and pack up the water deck here, now that we have a sense of how that works. And let's talk about its cousin, the fire deck. The fire deck is as simple as they come until it's not. So it is a pure damage deck. The whole point of the deck, well, I suppose there are 2 things. It's increasing your damage output. And then it is also burning off enemy attachments. I don't want to, burn is maybe a misnomer, forcing discards of enemy attachments. So let's look at some example cards here that I've pulled out. These are 3 of my favorite fire cards, and I think a lot of fire players would also agree. So starting with Sun Queen, let's just take a look at its Meteor move on the right in tandem with its passive. So Meteor is more of a psychic, and that's why it's Psychic Synergy, more of a psychic effect. And it guarantees a strong attack. Remember, strong attack is dealing with elemental advantage. So if fire attacked a plant Grimm, you would have a strong attack. This synergy guarantees a strong attack. So the enemy can't be immune, there can't be a weak attack, it can't be neutral, it's guaranteed strong. This Grimm, the Sun Queen's passive, says that when it lands a strong attack, you add 3 on top of the +2 modifier, which means Meteor, when it lands a strong attack, is going to be doing 13 damage. I mean, look at Fool's Desire. Fool's Desire only has 12 health. So if your opponent doesn't have a way of combating this creative setup, they could lose a Grimm in 1 swing. That is what fire is all about. Taking a look at Fool's Desire over here then, this is a fantastic illustration of the other thing that it does, which is forcing discards of bond cards. We talked a moment ago about attaching spirits to your Grimm. If you are, let's say, in this situation, let's say this is my ally up here, and they have an electric element attached. And let's say I'm playing wind, and I've got Fool's Desire over here. And let's just say, for the sake of this, I have Fire Synergy. I am scared of that electric element as a wind Grimm over here. I don't want that to target me, and they're currently immune to my wind damage. But with Fool's Desire's passive, it allows you to discard an attached spirit, so I could take a spirit from here and discard it. And in doing so, I can discard up to 2 enemy bond cards, which means I could literally take this and force it straight into discard. Now one of the 2 electric elements in the game that threaten my wind Grimm are gone, unless they have a Ghost Grimm to bring it back. Another thing that is really good about this is, remember, if your opponent can mount 3 spirits on a Grimm, they instantly get, oh, I'm taking everything here, that's all right. They instantly get a spirit bonus. So if my opponent here has 2 of these attached, which is quite dangerous, I have to be very worried of this 3rd one being attached. But with Fool's Desire's passive, I can discard a spirit, say get rid of this spirit and throw it away, and now I am much further from them launching a spirit bonus, which is a huge deal. Let's keep these in limbo for later. Now let's look at the last Fire Grim, because I think this one is extremely interesting when it comes to illustrating how fire works. So fire isn't just about increasing damage on direct attacks. It can also damage you in other unique ways. And it shares this quality with Ghost to an extent, though Ghost is a little more small chip damage, little pokes and prods, whereas fire is big swings, and in some cases, like the Heart Scale, unreactable swings. I would say as a sort of as a generalized vibe, fire is really good at taking not taking hits, but it has to be comfortable taking hits in order to do more damage. I guess that's the no pain, no gain sort of vibe. The Heart Scale's passive is that when this Grim is damaged other than by calculated attack damage, meaning if it's hit by a Ghost Spirit bonus, if it's hit by Confusion or by Grapple or by anything that isn't a declared attack on it, then it will take that damage, but it will deal double that value to any enemy Grim, which is a massive, massive swing. We've seen instances where I might have 6 cards in my hand and my opponent launches a Ghost Spirit bonus, which means both of my Grim take damage equal to the number of cards in my hand. Well, in this instance, Sun Queen will take 6 damage, Heart Scale will take 6 damage because I have 6 cards, but because of Heart Scale's passive, I can instantly, in an unreactable manner, because it's not a declared attack, do 12 damage to an enemy Grim, which is insane. What I love about this is it's a frail card. It's not going to get a lot of use, but when it does get use, it's massive. And it forces your opponent to really think carefully about doing something about this card. They want to keep it around, but they also don't want to keep it around. So very, very interesting deck. I think Fire players have innovated and labbed this deck to hell and back, and I absolutely love it. There are so many interesting interactions. So if you're interested in playing that, definitely join the Discord and start asking around. Let's look at Plant, which is frankly, I think, a deck that is underutilized and underappreciated. Though I would venture to guess that most veterans who play this game know how absolutely terrifying this deck is, because unsurprisingly, Plant is about healing, and it just never dies. It has a second sort of mechanical leaning or gimmick, and that is spirit control, or rather spirit stealing. So those spirits we talked about, attaching 3 of them to get a spirit bonus, it has cards that literally will steal spirits from your opponent, which does one of 2 things. It either threatens your opponent while they begrudgingly attach spirits and hope that you don't steal them, or it forces your opponent to not attach spirits, which makes it really scary for them if you get a Ghost Spirit bonus to attack them based on their hand, or frankly, if their playstyle relies on getting that spirit bonus, they're just not going to be in a position to do it. So let's take a look at a few cards here which I think really represent this deck well. First, let's talk about that Spirit Control and Spirit Steal. Trippy Tree is the perfect example, and all you need to look at is this Grim's passive, though it does have Vine Lash on the right, which steals a spirit card. Its passive says that on entry, meaning when this Grim is played into play, it steals up to 2 attached enemy spirit cards and can attach them to this Grim or its ally. So if, for example, Nevergreen was here, and I had a spirit attached already, and my opponent had, let's just say, 2 spirits attached. I wish those didn't stack, but that's okay. Had 2 spirits attached. The moment that Trippy Tree comes in, I would get to steal these spirits, not the Grim, and attach them to one of my Grim, or in whole or in part is how it clarifies. So I can split them. In this moment, I could attach both of them here, and then instantly take a Plant Spirit bonus to heal Nevergreen by 8. And then this is a great transition. Nevergreen's passive, all about healing in the Plant deck, says when healing this Grim or its ally, you add 3 to that health. So in this interaction, Nevergreen would actually heal by 8 plus 3, which is 11. So this thing starts at 13 health, which is relatively frail, but it can heal by massive, massive amounts. So that is something definitely to keep in mind when you're looking into the sort of healing component of the Plant deck. Now, the last one I wanted to bring up is just my favorite Plant card, frankly, and very interesting, and it's the Life Absurd. So the Life Absurd is aptly named. It is an absolutely unkillable. It's an absurd card that seems to never die. So this Grimm's passive says that it may expend up to 3 stamina after its action to heal double that value. So after you've healed as your action, or if you've attacked as your action using Crystal Vine or Deep Freeze, which, mind you, Deep Freeze, you can see on the right here, gains you stamina, which helps that passive out. Very nice interaction. Then you can pay up to 3 stamina to heal double that value. In this case, I spent 3 and I would have healed by 6. A little bit of an overheal there because 20 is the max. But you can see how this can get out of hand very quickly because it's not even a part of your action. Basically, you're getting a heal as your action, but you're getting a double heal as your action. So it comes in very frail at 14, but it can heal up to 20 with its first turn. This is a good point, I think, to flag what I mentioned at the start of this video, which is you really should be paying attention not to what individual decks do, but how they work with other decks. Think about how unbelievably good this Life Absurd card would be with any other water card that helps its ally gain stamina. Right? We've talked about the water mechanics that help you gain stamina. It also can help your ally gain stamina. And then Life Absurd's passive uses stamina in order to heal, which is a massive, massive boon. So definitely think about how these are going to start pairing together. So now that we've got our plant understanding, let's move on to Earth, which I think is the last of our sort of core mechanics. I would say actually Electric and Wind are also core mechanic decks. And then as we go down the line here, they get a little bit more heady, a little bit more, not complicated, but I would say more knowledge of the game helps with these decks. So here's what I want to talk about with the Earth deck. I would say on its face, actually, I want to pull a different one here. Let's pull this one here. Earth is all about one thing, really, which is taking a single declared attack and targeting both enemy Grimm with that attack. That is a facet of Earth synergy effects very often. It is also a facet of the Earth Haven, which you're going to see used very, very, very sparingly with the Earth deck. And by sparingly, I mean they're going to be very careful about when they play it because this is the bread and butter of the Earth deck. When you play this, will make or break your entire match with Earth. But if you do it right, it will absolutely destroy your opponent. So the whole thing about this, right, is let's say I have an Earth Grimm right here. We'll set this guy up with 18 health, and we'll put the Earth Haven in play and give him whatever ally we want. On an Earth Grimm's turn in the Earth Haven, I can, for example, use Sand Trap. I'll spend 3 stamina, and this single Sand Trap will be declared against both enemy Grimm independently, which means each is a declared attack. Each is independently reactable to, and of course, as always, my opponent only has 1 reaction. And so they can only react to one of them, effectively. If they paralyze me or freeze me or use root or something that prevents the attack as a whole, the declaration of the attack, they can maybe skirt by for a moment, but that double declaration impacts pretty much every possible reaction, which is crazy because you're spending 3 stamina to do effectively 12 damage before any modifiers are imposed. So using a single attack to hit both enemy Grimm. The other thing that Earth is really good at is frankly just doing any other mechanic that hits both enemy Grimm. So grapple is the status of Earth. And effectively what grapple does here, and don't worry about this wall of text, but if you see grapple, the 4th one down, there's 2 columns here. One is for explaining what happens on a reaction. The other is explaining what happens when not used as a reaction if they're inflicted by, say, a passive or a synergy effect. What grapple does is effectively it does splash damage at the attacker's ally. So if a Grimm attacks me and I react to grapple that attacker, then I'll take damage, but then their ally would take half of the damage that was done to my Grimm. So again, kind of spreading all of this damage out among multiple Grimm. And then Wake Awoken is a great example of also spreading damage among enemy Grim. For this Grim, on its passive, on entry, it deals damage to both enemy Grim equal to 3 plus 1 for each bond card attached to that enemy Grim. So if the enemy Grim has 2 attached bond cards, say a spirit and an element, then when this Grim enters, that Grim instantly takes 5 damage. And it does it to both of them in the Spirit of Earth. The last one that I want to bring up here, which I think is sort of Earth going crazy, is, as I mentioned, the Earth Haven is a huge deal. And once it's played for a round, it will be discarded from the match. So you really want to be careful about when and how you play that. Except Lost Temple's plant synergy. So again, think about using this with a plant deck. Moss Trap says revive any Afterworld to the Afterworld deck. Now, normally, when elemental decks rely very heavily on their big swings or big momentum plays using the Afterworld, so these examples would be Dark Realm, Earth Haven, I would say Psychic Expanse is a decent one, or Fire Empire, or let's say Ghost Dimension is a huge one because it prevents Ghost Grim from dying entirely. We'll talk about that soon. Usually, if an elemental deck relies heavily on its Afterworld to make big waves, the game doesn't naturally give you ways to revive its Afterworld because it would be too strong. It would be unbalanced. But Earth does have some options for bringing it back. You have to be creative about it and very clever. Here, you need plant synergy, but it is possible, and that's important. So with Lost Temple here, you can bring back the Earth Haven multiple times. As a slow Grim, you can do it like every other round with a lot of health here too, and use Earth Haven again, and use Earth Haven again, and just keep doing it. So definitely keep this one in mind if you want to play an Earth comp. So let's set this aside, and let's take a look at Electric, which is one of my favorite decks for sure. And I've pulled aside some really interesting Grim here. I think anyone who plays this game and is watching this knows what they're seeing here with Theseus Bud and Inevitable Ruler, and I think they very much validly fear Power Within when it's set up well as well. So let's start with Inevitable Ruler and talk about what Electric does. In its most simple form, Electric is speed or turn manipulation. A thing to keep in mind here is that in Grim, individual Grim take turns. Players do not take turns. So in this case, you can see how Inevitable Ruler is 12 speed, Theseus Bud has 8 speed, and Power Within has 6 speed. So if all of these were on the board, ignoring Theseus Bud's passive for a moment, if all of these speeds were on the board, Inevitable Ruler would go first, then Theseus Bud, and then Power Within, and then whatever other Grim, if let's say it's 5 speed, it's slower. The other thing so Electric is really good at changing the order of operations there, stepping in front of other Grim, or changing the way speed is calculated or checked. The other thing that Electric does very, very well is gain additional attacks. Generally speaking, every Grim has 1 turn in a round, and so they only have 1 attack. They gain their stamina, they draw a card, they place a card, and then they declare an action. One of those actions can be, and often is, an attack. So how do you gain additional attacks? Well, Electric has a lot of ways of doing that. The Electric Spirit bonus, in fact, we can view over here, when you attach 3 spirits to an Electric Grim, it instantly gains an attack. I mean, right away. The moment you discard those 3 spirits, you attach that 3rd spirit and discard them, you get to launch an attack, stepping in front of anything else that's happening on the board. It is very, very exciting. And again, sort of manipulating the order of operations. So let's first talk about this turn order stuff. Inevitable Ruler has one of my favorite passives in the game. I think everyone fishes for this card. It is a very, very nice card to take on lead. And it says that its allies can choose to have 15 speed, an extra draw, and an extra placement on their turns. So the extra draw and extra placement is more of a dark thing. As you can see, this has dark synergy. But the 15 speed is very much an Electric identity. It's very cool because the fastest speed in the game is 14. So granting your ally 15 speed basically guarantees that they're the fastest thing on the board. This is an exceptional way to take something like that, where is it? something like the Lost Temple, which we just talked about, which is at 5 speed, instantly next to Evitable Ruler, instead of 5 speed, this is an 18 health Grim with 15 speed. That is an unbelievable buff. So yeah, this thing is fantastic to put in play. On the gaining multiple attack side, let's look at Power Within. This thing's electric synergy, Power Spike, is very cool. Basically, you declare Power Spike, you hit an opponent. Then it's synergy procs, because of course synergy always happens after attack resolves. And it says expend 2 stamina to declare another attack. And then you've got to expend stamina for that attack. So the way that this works is if this Grim, for example, is at 15 health, which is how it enters, and 5 stamina, and let's say you have it in the water world here, which we currently have in. It'll gain 4 stamina instead of 2 on its turn, because that's what the water world does. Then it spends 2 stamina to use Power Spike. Does its damage. Using the synergy effect, it pays 2 stamina again. And now it can declare another attack, and it spends 3 stamina to use Electro Wave. Now let's say you have water synergy. This Grim and its ally each gain 3 stamina. And let's say you're in the water world. This gains 3 stamina plus 2 because of water world. You end the round back at 7 stamina. And now next round you can spend 2 stamina to use Power Spike, land an attack, spend 2 stamina, and then pay 2 stamina again to use Power Spike and land another attack. So you can keep peppering your opponent with attacks. And mind you, the really, really cool thing about this is that electric granting additional attacks is not just additional damage that can be reacted to by your opponent. Because your opponent only has 1 reaction in a round. That's why we have a tracker reaction cube right here. They can only react to 1 of these attacks. So if they don't react to that first Power Spike and disrupt it in some way, you may end up launching 3 additional attacks on them after stamina gains, etc. So this is a fantastic way of overwhelming your opponent. If that's the kind of way that you play, if you like to overwhelm your opponent with jumping in front of them and attacking them multiple times before they get a chance, this is definitely a deck for you. Now let's talk about the one that has been my stated main on and off for a very, very long time in this game, and that's the Wind deck. So the Wind deck is about 2 main things, one of which we already sort of talked about in the Earth portion of this video. So the first thing is swapping. You may know from watching the tutorial that there are 3 actions that you can take on your turn. One is attacking, that's very common. The other is healing, which is spending any combination of stamina and attached bond cards in order to gain 1-to-1 on health. So you could spend 5 stamina and 1 attached bond card. You throw it away to gain 6 health. And then the last thing you can do is swapping. Swapping is basically healing plus. If you're below your base health when you get to your action, so for example, if this is below 20 health, and you can heal as your action up to 20 health, then you're also able to take that Grim and put it back in your hand and bring in a fresh Grim, which is exceedingly useful because that fresh Grim has 5 stamina, like all Grim enter with, unless mechanics suggest otherwise by some text, and full health. Absolutely incredible, just taking the wind out of your opponent's sails, no pun intended. It's really good for stalling a match. The Wind deck is really good at getting swaps, not as actions, but as additional effects. So taking a quick look at these 2 cards here, we have the Noble Roar. Look at its passive. This Grim may swap to hand after landing a strong attack, and the incoming Grim enters with 4 less health. Now let's think about what I just described with swapping. Can we land a strong attack relatively easily? It's going to take a little bit of skill. You could attach a Psychic element to this Grim, put it in the Psychic Expanse, that's the Psychic Afterworld, and guarantee a strong attack. You could curse your opponent, that's the Ghost status, which guarantees the next time that Grim is targeted, it's a strong attack. So there are ways to set it up that don't require you to just naturally have an elemental advantage. If you can hit that strong attack, then this thing, it starts at 20 health. It could be down to 2 health. You hit a strong attack, it's out of there. Back to your hand. You bring in something new. And the best part about this is the last provision. That Grim enters with 4 less health. Meaning, the Grim that you bring in, when it takes its turn, can gain stamina, can draw a card, can place a card, and then can spend 4 stamina to heal by 4 to heal to full to swap and bring this back in or bring something else in. And so this is what the wind deck does. It's a rotating door of Grim, constantly swapping, forcing you to really beat them down to stop that rotation. So let's look at another one. Royal Cynic is a very cool one because this is one that gets a swap extremely easily and does the other thing that the wind deck is very good at. So taking a look at Flutter, the attack on the right here, this allows you to swap with a Grim in your hand and damage it, and then an enemy equal to half the incoming Grim speed. Let's take a look at this in combination with a card we talked about earlier, which is one of my favorite fire cards, which is here. Now we're starting to think about the way these go together. Let's say we're using Royal Cynic. Royal Cynic is next to a Wind Grim, so it has synergy on the Flutter attack. It uses Flutter and damages the opponent, and then Flutter synergy allows it to swap with a Grim in its hand. So let's say it goes back to your hand and this comes in. And then what else happens? Swaps with a Grim in your hand, and then you damage it and an enemy equal to half the incoming Grim speed. Well, this Grim speed is 11. So instead of coming in at 13, it's going to take half of that. In this game, you always round up, so it's going to take 6 damage based on its speed, ending up at 7. So it's coming in, taking half of its speed as damage. Remember Heartscale's passive? When this Grim is damaged, other than by calculated attack damage, which this is not a direct attack, deal double that value to an enemy Grim. So you have now effectively damaged them with Flutter, damage Heartscale for 6 damage, also damage an enemy Grim for 6 damage because of Flutter, and then Heartscale gets to say, let's just do 12 more. So you can start to see how this swapping is not only useful in a creative way for defensive options, but for offensive options as well, which is really, really cool. This is one of our favorite combinations in the Discord server. The butterfly scale, as we like to say, is very, very cool. And then the other thing that Royal Cynic does extremely well that is pertinent to the Wind deck is its passive. When it swaps, it can revive an Afterworld to the Afterworld deck. Imagine having this thing and having it swap and having it paired with Earth, which really loves that Earth Haven and wants you to revive the Earth Haven into this deck every time this thing swaps to hand. That is an unbelievable boon for the Earth deck. So you can think about ways that these pair together. And then the last Grim I want to show you in the Wind deck that kind of pulls it all together is the Lunar Wing and its passive. And actually, Swift Wing, its attack, allows you to replace the Afterworld. So in this case, you're not reviving an Afterworld, but at 12 speed, you are literally changing what the Afterworld is, which is an unbelievable help to set up your creative options with the Wind deck. But its passive is also extremely useful. If this thing swaps as its action, then whatever comes in takes a turn and ends the round, regardless of speed. So this has almost got an electric vibe to it. So if we start, and let's say we're at 10 health. Let's say we took 2 damage somehow, and we're at 10 health. On our turn, we're going to gain 2 stamina. We're going to draw. We're going to do a placement. Let's say we do that over here. And now we're going to spend 2 stamina to heal up to 12. And we're going to swap. This should also be gone. And the thing that we bring in, now remember, this is 12 speed. Let's say this was in hand. This is 12 speed, but its passive says whatever comes in takes a turn next and ends the round. Now let's say Noble Roar comes in. Takes its turn. It would be set up at 20 and everything. Takes its turn. You get whatever. Let's say this was here. You get another placement. And let's say Noble Roar now hits a strong attack. It allows it to swap and bring in something else. Now you've got Royal Cynic in. Round ends. We got Royal Cynic ready to use Flutter on the next round. So you can see how this just keeps turning. And you have a lot of Afterworld control with it. It's a very, very cool deck. I will say it's a little bit more of a high-level deck. Or high skill ceiling deck. So if you're looking for something to really learn the game and master, Wind is a great option. And now I will stop talking about Wind because it is one of my favorite decks in the game. And we'll talk about Light. Light is terrifying and I hate it, but I love it at the same time. So we're going to talk about these 3 cards. I think arguably there's a 4th card that I'm going to pull out here that I want to talk about as well, which is just unbelievably useful. So first, let's talk about the bread and butter of this deck. So this deck does two things. It gains knowledge and searches and pulls, so it's sort of got its thumb on everything in the game, in that you can see your opponent's hand, you can see your banish, you can see what's in the Bond deck that you haven't drawn, what's in your Grim decks, all of that. You can see everything. And it's very good at preventing opponents' disruption. So stopping their reactions from happening or nullifying their synergy effects, etc. Psychotrope is sort of the bread and butter of this concept. Its passive says that at the start of the round, so before any Grim takes their turn, it can discard an attached spirit card. We've seen this sort of mechanic a few times now with Abyssal Zone and others where they, Fool's Desire, that burning tree one, where they discard a spirit in order to carry something out. It can discard a spirit to remove its opponent's reaction. So literally, this is here at the start of the round. If I discard this spirit here, I can say, start of the round, I'm going to discard the spirit. You don't have a reaction. Now the entire round, I can launch attacks without impunity, with impunity. My opponent cannot do anything to prevent me from what I want to do, which is an extremely useful facet of the light deck. Let's talk now about Die Divinity, which is by far, I think, most light players' favorite card. This card is awesome because of its passive, and really just its passive. There's the Radiance and Feather Dance are great, but frankly, you will almost never see this Grim played through a full turn, and here's why. This Grim's passive says that it may expend 3 health to search instead of draw on its draw phase, and then shuffle whatever it searched. So let's play this out now that we know about the wind mechanics and swapping. So here's this Grim, fresh, 18 health, 5 speed. We're going to gain 2 stamina to start its turn. We're going to invoke its passive to spend 3 health. And now, instead of drawing, we're going to search. We now get to see everything that's in the Bond deck. And if my opponent's playing plant, I'm going to go yoink, and I'm going to take this fire right here so that I can react with an immunity later. We're going to shuffle that. Now, here's the best part. What is Dyed Divinity going to do as its action? Is it going to attack? Maybe. It's got an 8 damage attack, which is very useful, especially if you have light synergy and the Wind Utopias in play. You get a free swap. But if you don't have that set up, you're fine, because you've spent 3 health in order to do that search. And lo and behold, you probably have 3 stamina to heal by 3 in order to swap, which makes this a very effective light and wind Grim. It both searches the Bond deck and pretty much gets a free swap if you do it every time, allowing you to bring out something faster to play in the next round. Let's talk about Guiding Light now. This is a really, really cool light card that is just kind of unique in every way. So this Grim's passive. Well, let's talk about Flash first, its attack. Flash allows you to force your opponent to reveal their entire hand. And then you deal damage to any Grim equal to the number of elements in that hand. I'm going to bring it back here because it's here. Let's say you use Flash and your opponent takes 6 damage, and then you say reveal your hand, and they have 2 Grim in their hand. It says deal damage to any Grim. Well, let's say we deal that damage to Heartscale. Heartscale takes 2 damage, and then Heartscale's passive procs and says, oh, I'm going to do 4 damage to another Grim. And now Heartscale has taken 2 damage. It's set up for the next round to heal by 2 and swap. So you can see how you can creatively set up so many different things with these different interactions. But really, Guiding Light's utility is in its passive. While this Grim is active, it may keep Fiend's Favor for its player once between rounds and return it next round. So if this round I had Fiend's Favor and I played Waterworld and I have Guiding Light, you might say, oh, I'm going to take Fiend's Favor between rounds. Nope. Because of Guiding Light's passive, I get to keep it one time and put in any Afterworld that I want, which is extremely useful because not only do you get to put in an Afterworld that you want, but when you have Fiend's Favor, you also search your Grim decks, which means you're gaining slight card advantage over your opponent as well. And what's really cool about Guiding Light is it's while this Grim is active, which means if I swap it out by some mechanic and bring it in later, it's refreshed. and I could do it all over again. And you see this very often in the Wind Light or Aurora comp, where you get all these different swaps and Guiding Light in and out, Afterworld Revival, plus Guiding Light, putting in new Afterworlds every time. You cycle through a lot. It is very, I will say, I've played against it. It spins your head. It is really cool to see, though, because it's very, very creative for your, if you're doing it or if your opponent is doing it. It's very cool to see. And the last light card I want to talk about is Celestial Body, just because it's the only card in the game that does this. At the start of each round, you can discard one spirit from your hand, which is very nice. It doesn't have to be attached, so you don't have to set it up as much. And you get an extra reaction in the round. Well, your opponent's probably only going to attack twice, unless they have the electric deck, or they're playing Earth and they're getting those spread damage attacks. So having 2 reactions basically means you can react to both. It takes a lot of weight off your shoulders when you have 2 reactions at your disposal. Basically, just put this here and say, okay, I've got 2 of these, and I can react on your first Grimm's attack and not worry about what your slower Grimm is going to do. That's really what this comes down to, and it is extremely, extremely useful. So hopefully that's given you a good sense of what the light deck does. And let's move on. Let's move on to... Oh, I just put it right on top of there. Let's move on to the dark deck. And while I'm shuffling here, I'll talk a little bit about what the dark deck does. So dark is a very interesting one that's a little bit hard to identify. I would say the biggest thing is that it has extra draw power. So it draws extra cards. You end up with a much larger hand if you're playing dark, which you have to be careful about because there are checks in the game that will damage you based on your hand size. We've seen that with the Ghost Spirit bonus. But it's also not... it's probably more good than bad because having extra elements for immunity reactions or just having extra elements for synergy or extra spirits is extremely good. The other thing that I would say this deck is known for is sort of like sneaky tricks or position plays. And by that, what I mean or what I'm referencing is the Dark Spirit bonus. So the Dark Spirit bonus, which of course, again, you can see over here on this player guide, says that, and we're looking at the 4th from the bottom here, the next knockout by this Grimm in the round that this is triggered counts as 2 if using an attack or it's passive. So basically, if it gets a knockout on its own accord, then it counts as 2, which is a huge deal. If the Hunger Within gets 3 spirits attached, discards them, and then launches an attack to get a kill on the opponent, then my opponent is forced to pick up 2 of their banished cards, which is insane because you need 5 kills to win, and this just netted 2 for you effectively. Now, you don't get to remove 2 Grimm from the board, but frankly, I'll take that trade. So Dark Spirit bonus is a big part of the way that this plays. So let's just take a look at 3 cards here, which I think are indicative of the deck. I think most people would assume these are the ones that I would bring out. Hunger Within maybe is a little bit odd, but it does illustrate the first mechanic quite well, which is extra draws. So taking a look at this Grimm's passive. After this Grimm lands an attack, draw bond cards equal to the number of enemies hit. So if you hit 2 enemies, which you can do using its drought attack here on the left with Earth Synergy, you'll draw 2 bond cards after you attack. Really useful for just fluffing your hand and getting more options in there, getting more spirits. And then you can attach one of those to this Grimm. So whatever you draw, if you get a spirit or something, you can throw a spirit down to set yourself up for a Dark Spirit bonus, which is great for its crunch attack here, because this says that the next triggered, or if the Grimm triggered a spirit bonus in this round, you'll add 3 to damage. So really big wallop on the other side. So great for draw power. You can see a perfect example there. Every time you attack, you're drawing an extra card. Let's talk about Wanderwolf, which is a very interesting, sneaky trick play. Like I mentioned, is sort of the identity of Dark. This Grimm's passive says that it enters with 8 stamina. That's just sort of a balancing thing, because the next part says that it also can't be inflicted with paralysis. That is truly a balancing thing. The last part is its real passive. On entry, it may attack immediately. So the moment you place this Grimm down, regardless of where we are in speed order, we could be at 6 speed for all he cares, and he's 14. The moment he's placed down, he attacks immediately. And then his Shadow Stalk attack on the left here says, if used on entry, search Limbo for any 2 spirits and attach them to this Grimm and then shuffle Limbo, which is awesome because you can enter with, for example, a Ghost element attached. and then use Spirit Stalk on entry to go find and attach 2 spirits. And now suddenly you are perfectly set up for both a Dark Spirit bonus or a Ghost Spirit bonus for next round and your 14 speed. So you are very likely to do that before your opponent even has a chance to deal with you, which is really, really cool. So this is a good example of just the way that Dark can be very tricky and very surprising. And another way Dark can be very tricky is Purest Insanity, which is by far the most iconic card in the Dark deck. And again, we go back to the passive. This Grim may knock out itself, then an enemy Grim at the beginning of its turn, if this Grim has 6 or more health. So a bit of a balance there. You need 6 or more health so your opponent can double you down, and you're only 5 speed, so you got to last around. Unless you come in off of a knockout or off of a swap, which is very cool. Swap out a 6-speed Grim, bring this thing in, it goes next. Don't even take your turn, just knock yourself out to knock out your opponent. If you're winning on the banished count, you are bringing yourself that much closer to success, that much closer to victory. This is a full-on momentum positioning deck, and it is very, very fun to play. I highly recommend, if you want to get some like really, really unique reps in of this game, try the Dark deck. See if it works for you. Try it a few times because it takes a little bit of getting used to with the positioning, but definitely try it. So let's talk about Ghost now. Ghost is a very interesting deck in that it has relatively low damage output, but it is bolstered by non-attack damage. So we've talked a lot, especially with that Heartscale card, about damage that is not declared attack damage. It's not like I'm using I'm using Enwrap, I'm using Wind Whip. It is, after my attack, I will deal 3 damage. I will deal 6 damage. I will use a Ghost Spirit bonus to attack my opponent, both opposing Grim based on the number of cards in your hand. All of those sorts of things. So that's a big part of what Ghost is. The other thing, unsurprisingly, that Ghost does is it revives things from Limbo. Limbo is the discard in this game. It will sometimes revive Afterworlds, though generally speaking, it doesn't because of how good its Afterworld is. In fact, just like Earth, we'll talk about the Afterworld in tandem with the deck itself. But first, let's talk about these Grim. So, Deadly Kiss. Deadly Kiss is a great example of revival from Limbo. This Grim's passive says, when a Grim draws from Limbo, inflict Curse on any active Grim. And if it searches from Limbo, inflict Blight instead. So you're seeing here, it's not just getting draws from Limbo. It's doing something with it. It's like when we talked about water. It's not just gaining stamina. It's doing something with that stamina gain. Now here, Dream Shatter, the attack on the right, which is in-deck Ghost synergy, says you draw from Limbo. And if you're in the Ghost dimension, then you can search from Limbo. And so now here you can start seeing how the passive and the attack work together. You can inflict Curse, or you can inflict Blight. So very, very useful card here. Clearly has a bit of a poison identity as well, which is very status focused. We haven't seen a lot of that yet. But the Limbo and use of Limbo is very, very cool here. Let's talk next about Matron Veil on the right here. So Matron Veil's Enwrap attack is the one that I really want to take a look at, and then we'll look at his passive. Enwrap says deal damage to any Grim equal to the sum number of bond cards on all active Grim. Think about this. If we're in the middle of a match, I have this Grim here, and there's 2 other Grim here. 4 active Grim, all which may have an attached element and a spirit. Let's just say all of them have 1 attached element and 1 attached spirit. That is 8 bond cards. So after using this 2 damage attack and wrap, you get a free 8 damage swing. Unreactable, because it's not calculated attack damage, it's not a declared attack, it is just deal damage. That is a huge benefit to this deck. You do a lot of unreactable damage. And now let's look at the passive, which is the same concept. Before this Grim's action, expend 2 stamina to draw from Limbo. And if it's a Grim, deal 3 damage to a Grim. So again, 3 unreactable damage. On this Grim's turn, you can pull a card from Limbo. You can deal 3 damage if that's a Grim. Then use Enwrap to do 2 more damage. And then let's say do 8 more damage. In the end, doing 13 damage, 11 of which was completely unreactable. Your opponent, if they tried to react to Enwrap to like burn it or something to have damage, they would just turn Enwrap from 2 to 1. And then you would do 8 because you still have synergy. So this is a very, very good example of how Ghost works. The last one I want to bring up is the Soul Ephes here. In addition to having great Earth synergy, which has that spread each a declared attack synergy we talked about in the Earth portion of this, Enshroud is a great attack on this. On a strong attack, so it is a little harder. You have to get a strong attack, like we talked about with that Noble Roar swap mechanic. You can search Limbo for a Grim, reveal it, and add it to your hand. So you can go pull any Grim from Limbo, something that you really wanted that you lost, and pull it back. Think about how much we've talked about Heartscale. Think about the conversation we had about Trippy Tree, the one that on entry steals 2 spirits. You do that, and then it dies. You bring out Soul Ephes, and you go search for Trippy Tree, and you pull it back in your hand, and then you get to steal 2 spirits again later. It is so cool. You can pull your opponent's Grim. One of your opponent's Grim might get knocked out. You can go fish for it and take it yourself. So there's a lot of really cool options with this. And the last thing I want to mention is the passive here, which is very, very indicative of the other kind of thing that Ghost does in addition to chip damage and revival. It's just like narrowly avoiding death. So when an attack targets this Grim, you can discard 2 spirits from hand to take 0 damage from the attack. So you may want to be attaching spirits to this Grim, or you may want to hold some spirits in hand and just discard 2 of them to take literally nothing. It is a free immunity. It's not technically an immunity. You take 0 damage, which means if your opponent has a synergy effect, they just have a 0 damage attack and that synergy still procs. But it is exceptionally, exceptionally useful. And I already have it here. The last thing I want to mention is the other way you can narrowly avoid death, which was mentioned earlier in this video, is the Ghost Dimension. Reading the top box here, Ghost Grim may choose to live on 1 health instead of being knocked out. If a Ghost should be knocked out in this round, they live on 1. That's it. No questions asked. You cannot knock out a Ghost in the round that Ghost Dimension is in. So think about, again, Whisper. The Whisper comp, which is Wind and Ghost. Wind is really good at reviving Afterworlds and bringing back Afterworlds. Imagine, for a moment, this next to this, which is a very, very cool idea. Lunar Wing has the Swift Wing attack. Replace the Afterworld, even with a discarded Afterworld. Let's say Ghost was gone and you did this. Boom, Ghost is back. Soul Ephes is not dying. End of the round, this goes away. And we're in a new Afterworld. Lunar Wing goes at 12 speed. Replace the Afterworld, even with the discarded Afterworld. Boom. Soul Ephes is not dying again. And you can keep doing this as long as, of course, Lunar Wing has Wind synergy and it's around. So this is a very, very cool illustration of how Ghost can just get really, really wild really fast by just frankly not dying. Let's talk about Psychic, and we have 2 more here, Psychic and Poison. And both of these have a lot to do with these sort of elemental interactions in the game, though this is more raw elemental interactions, and then in Poison we'll see that it's more about statuses. So here's the 3 Grim that I want to talk about in this, and anyone who loves Psychic, I personally have been maining Psychic for a while. I absolutely love it. Everyone who plays Psychic will know that these 3 Grim are the bread and butter of the deck, and they are really, really cool in unique ways. There's one more here, which I actually am going to pull out because I think it would behoove me not to bring it up, and we'll talk about that last. So the first is Hypnologica. Well, let's back up. Let's talk about what elemental interactions are and how they can be manipulated. So what I mean by that is when my Grim attacks your Grim, we do a quick calculation to determine whether I have hit a strong attack, a weak attack, whether you're immune, or whether it's neutral. Most of the time, it's going to be neutral. But if I'm a Water Grim and I'm attacking you as a Fire Grim, we call that a strong attack and we add 2 damage. There's a few important things to that. 1, you're adding 2 damage. And in this game, addition and subtraction comes before multiplication and division. We haven't looked at any cards that multiply damage, but there are cards that do that. And so a strong attack can be ballooned up to 4 or even 8 additional when you're doing this multiplying effect. The other thing that's important about that is there are a lot of effects that require you to hit a strong attack. So for example, Hypnologo here on the attack Whirlpool says on a strong attack, set any Grimm's stamina to 0. Exceptionally powerful. And again, water play, right? Water synergy. Stamina control. So you can kind of see how these start to pair together. This thing's passive, though, is awesome. This Grimm and its ally take 0 damage from strong attacks. So if your opponent is trying to target you with a strong attack, they can do that. But they're not going to touch you. They're not going to do any damage to you. It is so cool to have this thing out and react to become weak to your opponent's attack. And they say, why did you do that? And you say, well, it's because this Grimm says I take no damage. It's very frustrating to play against, but it's very nice to play against when you're playing, or nice to play with when you're playing Psychic. And part of the way that you get there is Mental Mask. So let's look at the Delusion attack on the right here. Search for and reveal 2 bond cards. Very likely to be elements in this case. Place one in your hand and shuffle the other back in the bond deck. This is a full-on mind game. I'm going to pull a fire and a water out of the bond deck. I'm going to flip them upside down. I'm going to shuffle them up. I'm going to peek at them. And I'm going to take one of them to my hand. And I'm going to put another one back. And now you are playing around both of those. Because I've just revealed to you not only that I have one of them, but that the other one is somewhere in the bond deck. And you have no idea which one I took. So you can not only take a bond card that you really want and get that reaction that can make you weak to an attack and you take 0 damage from strong attacks like we've discussed. Not only can you take that bond card totally for free, but you force your opponent to consider 2 of them. And it really bends the mind. I honestly, it is so weird playing against Psychic. The other thing that Mental Mask does really well is sort of spatial play. So Psychic does 2 things. It sort of plays with the elements, manipulates them, and then also like uses and searches for them. But it also has spatial orientation to a degree. So Mental Mask has a wind synergy, a little harder to pull off because you need out-of-deck synergy, called Psych Spin. And it says this Grimm may swap with an enemy Grimm so long as they share a common element. So you attack an enemy Grimm if you have wind synergy, and Mental Mask has a common element with an enemy. So let's say it has an earth attached and you're playing against the earth deck. It can swap. Literally, I take this Grimm and throw it over here, and I steal your Grimm and put it here. And now suddenly I've stolen your Grimm, which is really, really good for disrupting any well-laid plans that you have. Mind you, this thing's passive. It says that when it swaps with Psych Spin, it's automatically knocked out. So not only am I giving you Mental Mask and stealing your Grimm, this thing also immediately goes to discard. It dies, and you're forced to pick up a Banished. So it's a free kill. It's hard to set up, but it is a free kill. And you can get there using your synergy, using your element play, being very creative, being very position focused. So the last 2 cards I want to talk about here, I'll put this to the side. The last 2 cards I want to talk about here are Portal Mage, which is like the iconic Psychic card. And then we'll talk about Odd Stranger. Actually, let's talk about Odd Stranger first. So Odd Stranger is sort of a weird one. This thing has a probe attack on the right. It says, on a strong attack, all Grimm and their bond cards rotate clockwise. It clarifies that it's not considered a swap because there's a lot of mechanics that trigger when a swap happens. This is nuts. Literally all Grimm rotate clockwise. And then its passive says, 1, it can't be status, so you can pull this off pretty well. And 2, after rotating, you deal 5 damage to the Grimm clockwise of this Grimm. So this thing will go here, and then this Grimm will take 5 damage. I will steal one of your Grimm, and then this one moves over here. And now you end up with a Odd Stranger with Psychic Synergy you probably don't have access to, that can't be status but really doesn't do much else, and is only 13 health. Very, very, very fun play. And you might say, well, it's on a strong attack. It requires a strong attack. Well, I would tell you, check out the Psychic Expanse, which is the Psychic Afterworld, which guarantees that Psychic Grimm, using any element to attack, hit with strong attacks. Guaranteed. Enemy can't be immune. It is a strong attack. So this thing, this probe, it's actually quite easy to pull off. And you're going to see it every time you play Psychic. It's very, very cool. So lastly, Portal Mage. Portal Mage is all about two things. Teleport. Actually, this is a great example of the whole deck. Teleport says on a strong attack, again, you can pull that off. Swap the target with a Grim in your hand, keeping its health. And ignore the Wind Utopia, which, mind you, says that when you swap, the swapping Grim coming in has 20 health. So in this case, it says no. Whatever you took has the same health. So let's take a look at how this works. If this is the Grim on the other side, so remove that for a second, and it is 13 health, right? Let's say this has been damaged to the point where it's at 3 health. And I use Teleport, and I hit a strong attack. And I hit Odd Stranger down to this 3 health. I get to suddenly take Odd Stranger and put in anything I want on the other side. Now I own Odd Stranger. I've taken your Grim. I've taken a status. I've taken a lot of options from you and given you a lemon that stays at 3 health. Extremely annoying to play against, because you could spend so long setting up synergies that you want and getting passives that you want, and then suddenly it teleports to your opponent's hand and is replaced with something you don't need. Very, very cool. Finally, let's look at the passive here, which is really why this card shines. It can reverse elemental interactions when declaring an attack or when an attack is declared on it. So if, for example, Heartscale here attacked Portal Mage with fire damage because it's a Fire Grim, I could react to place a water element like normal and say, oh, I'm immune. But let's say I don't have this water element. Let's say instead I have a plant element in my hand. Well, I could say, okay, you're attacking me with fire damage. I will reverse elemental interactions, and I will use my reaction to become immune. Normally, plant would be weak to fire, but because of what Portal Mage can do, we often call it portal maging, you can literally reverse it and find new immunities where they didn't exist before. Now when I attack Heartscale with plant damage, I can say I'm going to attack with plant damage and reverse elemental immunities, so that's a strong attack. Very, very cool interaction. So that's the Psychic deck. It is, frankly, the best way of breaking the rules of the game in every way possible. Now let's talk about one that really abides by the rules of the game and just abuses the heck out of them, and that's the Poison deck. Poison deck has some really, really cool cards. Frankly, this was very difficult to decide which ones to talk about, but I've decided these 3. So Oil Befoul is most Poison players' favorite Poison card. And that's because of its passive more than anything. Before its action, it can spend 3 stamina to inflict any status on an enemy Grim other than Throw. So we say other than Throw because Throw prevents the Grim from attacking as their action. And if you can inflict Throw, willy-nilly without a reaction, it's pretty powerful. But any other status is still, frankly, very, very powerful. Is your opponent getting too many spirits attached to them? Great. Use this passive to inflict root and bounce all those spirits back to their hand. Is, an enemy going to be really fast next round and you don't want to deal with them? Great. Use this to inflict paralysis. So next round they go at the end of the round in the paralysis phase. Are you worried about their, the stronger attack, the heavier attack on their card? Great. Use this passive to inflict freeze so they can't choose it. There's so many different things that you can do with this. And one of the best things that you can do with it is inflict Blight, which is the poison status. Blight doubles base damage the next time that Grim is attacked. So for example, if the Oil Befoul is here, and let's say Simoon Cloud is here, on Oil Befoul's turn, let's just set him up and walk through it real quick. We're at 15-5. We gain 2, right? We draw. We do a placement. Now we use my passive. Before my action, I can spend 3 stamina to inflict any status. So I'm going to spend 3 stamina, and I'm going to inflict Blight on the Heartscale. So we'll mark that up here. Now, as the Oil Befouled action, I'm going to spend 3 stamina to use Petrolash. Here's what Blight does. Petrolash is 6 damage. Blight doubles that base damage before all modifiers, meaning when I launch this attack, I'm doing 12 damage. Against this 13 health Grim, that means without reaction, it's at 1 health. Blight is extremely, and then of course this clears, extremely, extremely powerful. Now let's look at another interaction with another Grim here. Simoom Cloud. A lot of people's favorite poison Grim if it's not Oil Befoul. This thing's passive says deal 5 damage to enemy Grim when they're inflicted with Blight. So, Oil Befoul's turn. I do everything I just did. I inflict Blight on Heartscale. Simoom Cloud instantly triggers and says, oh, you've been blighted. You take 5 damage. Now you're at 8 and you're blighted. Oil Befoul attacks. Even if you try to prevent that, you're likely going to die this round because Simoom Cloud has passive unreactable damage when enemies are blighted. Very, very powerful cards. So this is a good way of illustrating. You don't just inflict status as a poison deck. You also abuse Grim who are status. You really use it to your advantage. I actually want to talk about 2 cards in this deck to wrap this up. And this is just, again, ways to abuse inflicting status. Mors Machina is really, really cool. And I think a lot of poison players' probably 3rd favorite card. I see it a lot. I see it discussed a lot. And it's because of its passive. Again, if this Grim lands an attack on a status Grim, heal this Grim's ally equal to calculated damage. So if this thing does 6 damage to a Grim that's status, it's going to heal by 6. But if the opponent is blighted, they're taking 12 damage from Smog. And so your ally is healing by 12 damage. That is insane. That is insane amounts of healing. So if you can set up a good Blight play with Mors Machina going top of the round, you can really, really keep your Grim healthy, which is just so useful. And then Sleeping Death is just a wild one, and this is what we'll end it on. This passive says, add 4 to damage on this Grim's and its allies' attacks when they're status. So instead of wanting to inflict status on your opponent, this one actually prefers you being status. And then it says, ally ignores the halving effect of burn. So if your ally is burned, they gain 4 damage, and their attack is not halved, which is normally what burn does. What's really cool about this is you have a synergy effect on Dry Rot, which says inflict root on the target, heal 2 health, and burn the Grim's ally. So you literally get to burn your ally, and they can use that to their advantage to do additional damage. Very, very, very creative plays in the poison deck. I would heavily encourage anyone who is interested in sort of diving deeply into the core mechanics of the game to take a really close look at poison when they're thinking about what they want to pair with other decks. So that's every deck in the game. This was a bit of a longer video, but I think it's worth it to really explain everything that you need to know about how these different decks play and to just give a little bit of an inside look into the different cards and how they're built. Again, if you have any questions, please do feel free to join the Discord server where you can hear about more of the cards. We do a lot of like questions of the day and meta discussion where players are constantly discussing like what they think is good and new combinations that they've uncovered on sort of these like labbing treasure hunt series that they go on. Definitely jump in and say hello, watch streamed matches. We do them all the time. As a reminder, if you're watching this before we launch, keep an eye out, join the mailing list, join the Discord, follow the Instagram, keep up on news. And if you're watching this after launch, there's probably a link somewhere on the YouTube where you can go buy the game. And all of these cards are in one box. So, this video is not to teach you which deck you want to buy. You will buy all of them if you get the game. And you can enjoy playing all of them at your leisure. Again, I am Michael Pluzzi, the creator of Grim the Card Game, and I hope you all have a grim day.